Genetics play a huge role in how you look, and this is particularly true when it comes to aesthetics. I feel people in the fitness community don't say this enough. Ronnie Coleman, Chris Bumstead, Lee Haney, Brian Hendrickson, these are all people with top tier genetics. I'm talking less than 0.00001% of the population. Yes, they're hard workers, they're consistent and whatnot, but genetics are the bigger factor in how they look.
My mom's sitting right here on the sofa. This is just been, everybody wondering where I get my genetics from. I definitely didn't get them from my dad. I got them straight from my mom.
I can give you one little bicep.
Genetics even play a factor in their ability to work hard and stay consistent. That's part of what I'm going to be looking into in this video. What exactly does it mean to have good genetics? What traits do people with good genetics have, and how many of these traits do you have? Well, let's dig into it. So I decided to group these traits into three: inherent genetics, capacity genetics, and response genetics. Some of these traits fit into more than one group, which you will see as we continue with the video. Inherent genetics are genetics that manifest naturally with little to no human intervention or stimuli. Things like height, bone structure, muscle shape, strength, power, hormone levels, muscle fiber types, hunger, and metabolism. Capacity genetics are ones that need stimuli to manifest and determine how much you can do or take, i.e. your capacity. Things like muscle building capacity, endurance, willpower or tenacity, recovery, and intelligence. Response genetics determine how well you respond to agents that promote muscle building, such as steroids, or your response to stimuli such as resistance training. Okay, let's have a look at these traits one by one, starting with the inherent genetics. Number 1, height. Here we have pictures of 25 of some of the most famous bodybuilders of all time: Eugene Sandow, Steve Reeves, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Frank Zane, Lou Ferrigno, Franco Colombo, Mike Menzer, Sergio Oliver, Serge Nubret, Tom Platz, Lee Haney, Dorian Yates, Flex Wheeler, Ronnie Coleman, Kevin Levrone, Jay Cutler, Dexter Jackson, Phil Heath, Kai Green, Brandon Hendrickson, Breon Ainsley, Jeremy Buendia, Chris Bumstead, Big Ramy, Terence Ruffin. You will notice that on this list, only 4 are below 5'7", which is about the average human height globally. The majority of these people range between 5'8" and 6'2" in height, which is average height to moderately tall. This is an indicator that muscles do not look as good on short people. WWE wrestlers are another clear example of this. Also, the taller you are, the more muscle you're likely to build while remaining aesthetic, because you have a bigger and longer frame to fill up. Short muscular people often don't look as good because they are already at a vertical disadvantage. Gaining too much muscle only makes them appear shorter. Just take a look at the 212 competitors. They don't look all that good. So if you're around 5'7" to 6'5", you've already ticked one box in the good muscle building genetics. If you're somewhere in the middle of this range, which is around 6 foot, you have the most ideal height for bodybuilding. For reference sake, C-Bum is 6'1", Ronnie Coleman is 5'11", Arnold is 6'2", and Lee Haney is 5'11". These are 4 of the top 5 grades on our list, and they are very close to that ideal height. Number 2, skeletal structure. If we have a look at our list of bodybuilders again, you notice that most of them share similar traits: broad shoulders, small waist, long limbs, thicker than average bones, which can be seen through their wrist size. They may not have all these traits, but they probably have most of them. Lee Haney and Brandon Hendrickson are a very good example of the guys who have all these traits. You see, bone structure determines how your body is shaped, thereby determining how good you look. Now, how often do you see an elite bodybuilder with narrow shoulders, a thick waist, and tiny wrists? They are there, but their success comes more from other genetic traits that we'll also talk about. Bodybuilders with bad bone structure usually depend more on being mass monsters, but then again, they are not aesthetic. So if you do not have good bone structure, you'll probably never look as good as someone who does. Number 3, strength and power. I grouped these two together because they are very closely related. Power is simply strength times speed. So the person who can move the most weight in the shortest time is the more powerful person. Strength and power are closely linked with muscle size and muscle type. Naturally strong and powerful people usually have muscles on average. Take Johan Blake for example, or Maris Pudzianowski. Naturally strong and powerful people who probably had a higher than average muscle muscle mass before they began training. This gave them a better starting point, which therefore gives them a higher likelihood of building more muscle. Such people often have a larger proportion of type 2 muscle fibers, which are not only better at force production and explosive movements, but tend to grow bigger in response to resistance training. So, if you're not naturally strong and powerful, you probably do not have a lot of muscle to begin with, and you probably don't have as many type 2 muscle fibers, putting you at a genetic disadvantage. Number 4. Hormones. Guys with higher levels of hormones such as testosterone and growth hormone tend to be able to pack on more muscle, as these hormones play a large part in tissue building. This is particularly true for people with higher amounts of androgen receptors, which are basically the components that mediate the action of hormones that leads to tissue growth. Hormones also affect your hunger and satiety levels. People with higher levels of ghrelin tend to feel hungry a lot more often. They have trouble controlling how much food they eat and are more likely to be overweight. Another hormone, called leptin, signals your body that you have enough fat in your body and you need to stop eating. People with low levels of leptin tend to eat more since it takes longer for their brain to receive the signal that they should stop eating. Leptin is produced in the adipose tissue, or the fat cells, and the more adipose tissue you have, the more leptin you produce. This seems like a good thing at first glance, but leptin production reaches a point of diminishing returns where you begin to develop leptin resistance if you surpass a certain level of leptin production. Your brain becomes desensitized to leptin, so the signals do not work as efficiently as they should. Sort of like how type 2 diabetes works, where your cells become insulin resistant. Testosterone and leptin also affect energy levels, with high testosterone and moderately high leptin levels causing higher energy, and low testosterone and leptin resistance causing low energy levels. If you mostly have high levels of energy, don't feel hungry too often, and do not have trouble with stopping eating, you probably have good hormone levels and are more likely to build more muscle and be leaner. If you struggle with the opposite, then your hormone levels are probably not the best and you're more likely to hold on to more fat and build less muscle. Number 5. Metabolism. This one is pretty simple. Low metabolism is bad as you tend to burn less calories and store more fat, and higher metabolism means higher calorie burning and more likelihood of being lean. If you often have low energy levels, then you probably have a slow metabolism. Like all others, this trait is interlinked with the other traits in this video, such as hormone levels. Metabolism has an optimal level where you want to be at. Going above this level begins to create problems, such as a high heart rate, sweating, insomnia, and the likes. If you recover fast from exercise, have frequent and predictable bowel movements, and always have good energy levels, then your metabolism is at an optimum level. Number 6. Muscle shape. So far I've mentioned 2 inherent genetic traits that you basically can't do anything about without surgery, while the other 3 can be enhanced by a change in lifestyle. Muscle shape is another genetic trait that you can't really change. This is affected by the length of your tendons in relation to your muscles and the point where your tendons insert into the bone. People with shorter tendons tend to have longer muscles that fill out their frame more. Forearms are a good example of this. Look at how huge Ramon Dino's forearms are. This is because his tendons are shorter and his muscles are longer, so they fill up a larger part of his forearms. This is very different from someone like Albert Beckles, who has very short forearm muscles and long tendons, making most of his forearm appear empty. This is also true for muscles like the lats, where we can compare Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has longer lats with shorter tendons, to his modern day comparison, Wesley Vissers, who has shorter lats and longer tendons. For some muscles like the biceps, long muscles and short tendons are not the most ideal. A bit of an equilibrium is optimal to allow for the biceps to fill out the arm while simultaneously having a good peak. The guys on the right have good muscle shapes for those particular muscles, while the guys on the left have the opposite. So if the majority of your muscles, or rather the most aesthetic muscles on the human body, have a good shape, then you have a better chance at looking very good as compared to someone who is the opposite. Okay, moving on to capacity genetics, starting with muscle building capacity. Some people simply have the capacity to build more muscles as compared to others. Some people start out slim and then end up being bigger than someone who had a better starting point. Muscle building capacity is affected by many different things, some of which I have already talked about and some I will later. Muscle building capacity genetics often manifest after someone begins to work out. You can never really know how much muscle you can build unless you actually build it. Next we have endurance. Endurance affects your performance in the gym. You need to have a decent level of endurance to get through a grueling set or a grueling workout. People with decent to high endurance tend to get closer to 0 RIR, which is what is optimal for muscle growth. Now, high levels of endurance aren't all that important in muscle building, as it often involves sets that last under a minute with longer rest periods. However, a decent level of endurance is still needed. Say you're doing a set of 12 squats at an RIR of 1. Most people are probably going to be out of breath first before reaching 1 RIR, and they will probably fail to get those 12 reps because they can hardly breathe, not because their leg muscles are actually tired. So having a higher cardiovascular endurance will help you here, and you will be able to work harder in the gym and build more muscle. Recovery is another capacity genetic trait that affects muscle growth. Some people will do 7 sets of a leg workout at 4 to 2 RIR and be sore for 5 days, while others will do the same amount of sets at a higher intensity of 2 to 0 RIR but will have recovered in 36 hours. This means that the latter can recover more quickly and can work out harder than the former. The result is more muscle growth. So if you recover faster from exercise than other people, then you stand a better chance at gaining muscle. Another trait in this category is willpower or tenacity. Some people are just born with the trait of being very determined. They have a high level of control over their mind and can get themselves to do very difficult things and succeed. I'm talking to you, David Goggins.
They don't know me, son!
These are often the types of people who work hard in the gym. It is very hard to consistently get to 0 RIR, and tenacious people are mentally strong enough to go there enough times for optimal muscle growth. Tenacious people can also overcome laziness and stick to a workout or a diet program. If you're not tenacious, all this is very hard for you and you will find it very difficult to build and maintain a good-looking body. The last trait for this category would be intelligence. Stupid people do some stupid shit, and in the gym, this can lead to some life-threatening injuries. Intelligent people are more likely to avoid injury and lessen their time out of the gym due to injury. Additionally, more intelligent people tend to be more knowledgeable on exercise and know how to structure their workouts better. This means they tend to use the most effective workout programs and techniques. So if you're really stupid, then you don't stand the best chance at building an impressive physique. We are now in the final category, and let's split it into two: response to training and response to performance enhancing drugs. Some people generally respond to resistance training better than others. This is very closely linked to muscle building capacity as well. Some people who have a slower response to training but a higher muscle building capacity. Another person who have a faster response to training but a lower muscle building capacity. So what will happen is person B initially gets bigger than person A, let's say the first 5 years of training. However, person B peaks early as they are closer to their capacity, while person A is not near their capacity and keeps growing constantly. In 5 more years, you would be shocked to see person A being bigger than person B. Person C now has both a high muscle building capacity and fast response to training. Now, this is an elite trait to have, the cream of the crop. On the opposite end, we have the worst trait to have, low muscle building capacity and a slow response to training. These are the people who will train for 5 years but hardly look like they work out at all. Response to PEDs is pretty much straightforward. Some people, usually people with a lot of androgen receptors, basically blow up after taking performance enhancing drugs. They go from 170 pounds to 230 pounds in a matter of months. Such people respond really well to PEDs. Other people will notice hardly any muscle growth after using PEDs. They don't respond well to PEDs by nature, therefore do not benefit much from them. Now, you can only ever know how well you respond to PEDs after taking them, but I highly discourage against ever using performance enhancing drugs. They are a danger to your health and it is best to stay natural, which is what we advocate for on this channel. So how do you know if you have good or bad genetics? Well, just list down all these traits and see how many of them you have on the positive side and to what extent. Take me for example. This is how many of these traits I think I am gifted with and the degrees to which I believe I have these gifts. I decided to just use a 1 to 10 scale so that I can come up with some sort of rating, and if I average out the 12 traits I rated myself on, I am around a 7.5 out of 10 when it comes to having good genetics. Obviously, this is a flawed method to use and it is very subjective, but when used by an experienced person, I believe it gives a very fair idea of how good your genetics are. Just remember, compare yourself to the average person, not to Chris Bumstead, not to Simeon Panda or The Rock or Chris Evans. These are elites, and using them as a reference point puts even me at a 5 out of 10 at best. How well do you think I rated myself, and what would you rate yourself using the same method? Also, if there are any other traits that I may have left out, go ahead and put them in the the comment section below and I will make another video talking about them. I will also make a video about good genetics for women that focuses on sexiness, so be on the lookout for that one. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, stay natural.